Welcome to Talking Jazz. My guest today is Frank Glover, clarinetist, extraordinaire composer, and we're proud of his Indianapolis area heritage. So it's one of our own, and we'll feature a breadth of his work from early on to very recent, and with a lot of different collaborators. So welcome, Frank.
Thank you, hon. It's thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a real treat to have you. And every so often I did get to play with you, which it's an even better treat. But but it's also good to talk music sometime. And something people listening might not realize actually about your background. So maybe give us just a little summary how you got into playing the clarinet, which is not your usual jazz instrument that you see everywhere, and how you got interested.
I think I probably got interested from Pete Fountain records I heard when I was a kid. Um, I loved Pete Fountain. I still love Pete Fountain. Um, and so when it came time to pick an instrument when we were in school, the clarinet attracted me, and so that's sort of how I was introduced to the clarinet.
Which school was that? Where did you go to?
I went to Southport Elementary School.
Southport Elementary.
Right. In I
Start.
think it was fifth grade or something like that. They
Hmm.
they let us choose an instrument, which is, you know, it's a super important cultural thing.
Mhm.
I mean, you take instruments away from the kids, it's disastrous for culture. You know.
I think every story starts somewhere, in elementary, middle school, where you saw something, you got exposed, you got the opportunity to play or pick an instrument, and it goes from there. I mean, those are called the formative years, and this is where you get that impression of, oh, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And if you don't get that opportunity, it's a lost opportunity. You're absolutely right.
That's for sure. You can't manufacture that yourself. I mean, we all have those sort of moments where the spirit jumps out at us. Whether it's nature or music or whatever. And just like you said, I mean, if you don't have the opportunity, you can't manufacture that yourself. If you've never seen the forest, you you can't have the experience of the spirit of the forest. So
Right, right. And these opportunities also need to be at a certain time. It's very difficult to do that later. It's like learning a language, right? If you learn it early on, you speak it without an accent. But like me, if you get into it later, you will never ever lose your accent.
that's true, but in a way, I don't think the spirit has really any age to it.
Mm,
Like, when you're talking, yeah, we learn slower and things like that, but um, I have a friend, Lois Templeton, that went to art school at 50, and I love her work. And the spirit can hit us at any age, I think. And even though we're definitely not going to progress as far as a young person, the love that we have for our new
mm.
art or whatever it is the same.
True, true, absolutely. And I believe you went to IU eventually, right?
Yeah, I made a terrible show there at IU for a year and a half, and I basically flunked out of David Baker's jazz class. I'd been playing Dixieland clarinet, and my audition was on giant steps
Oh, that
on
sounds like
clarinet,
David. Right.
which there's not very many people in the world that can shred giant steps on the clarinet, and I wasn't one of them. So it was a disaster, and the theory classes were too hard for me, and I think I use a very very hard school, and so I'd had enough after a year and a half, and I just said I'm gonna quit and try to play tenor like John Coltrane, and that's what I did, and ended up playing the Chatterbox, and then I'm still there 35 years later.
I know, I know. That's amazing. So Yeah, I would say let's dive into a tune first before we actually go into that chatterbox history. You know, that's a good connection point. And you brought me a tune called One Way Ticket, which is from the album Politico. And this was in 2010 on Owl Studios, which, you know, Owl Studios was such a great opportunity for Indianapolis musicians of having that support at that time, right? What
Right.
should we listen for in that tune? Give us a little backdrop to get ready.
Well, I wanted to make a clarinet record that had a certain kind of energy to it, um, that is not heard a lot. I mean, see, I grew up with Aerosmith and Queen and the Eagles and you know that kind of music, and there's a lot of energy there that um, you don't often hear paired with the clarinet. And
Mhm.
even though the music doesn't sound anything like Aerosmith or you know Queen or anything like that, still it has a certain energy that reminds me of those kind of bands. You know, it's a record that uh, has a lot of, you know, funk energy to it, and then it has a wide variety of um, compositional colors like string orchestra and jazz orchestra and that kind of thing. So One Way Ticket was really my first try at trying to make a, a rather hard edged but listenable clarinet piece.
Well, it's a very, very good try and it's very groovy. So so let's have a listen. So One Way Ticket is actually more in the combo setting, and we'll hear Jack Helsley on bass and Bryson Kern on the drums and Steve Ali on piano with you on clarinet from the 2010 release Politico. Here we go. That was one way to get a selection from the album Politico, and this is a album by my guest today, Frank Glover, who you also heard on clarinet. And before we listen to the tune, you mentioned the Chatterbox, which is an icon in Indianapolis, that little jazz club on Massachusetts Avenue. We played there 18 years on Monday nights, and it was just great. And after 34 years, you're still there. But there was a time you were there a lot, and you partnered with Claude Sifferlin, and I think we should just talk about Claude and the relationship of the two of you.
Yeah, it was a very special relationship. I miss that the sound of us playing together
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit. Um, Claude was an indie pianist. He called himself just a tavern player, but he had a very pianistic uh, orchestral feeling to the way he played the piano. And the duo record, I think when you hear it, it doesn't lack, or at least when I hear it, it doesn't sound like it needs a bass player. He was very good with his left hand, um, keeping the motion going without just walking a bass line that you hear often when you hear duo recordings, this kind. Um, he introduced me to Takamitsu, who's one of my very favorite composers of all time, and you can sort of hear the orchestral influence in Claude's playing of Takamitsu. It's it's hard to hear it, but it's definitely there. And we played at the Chatterbox for almost 30 years together, and made a record together called Siamese Twins,
Mhm.
and and then Ben Sloan made a movie of us called uh, Take Two. So
Where is that actually available?
I don't know where it is. You can find it. It's out there. You can
Mm-hmm,
find it.
mm-hmm,
I should put it on.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Something to look for. Yeah, that was a great, because you also were able to go on one of the NEA grants to Carnegie Hall together at the time. And I remember Dave Anderchik packing up a whole bus and coming along to support.
I signed. Uh, I um, well, I can't remember what is it when you call when you. I submitted. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
My first language, but geez, I submitted for the NEA just sort of almost as a joke. I didn't think I'd get it at all, you know. And it was a nice phone call to get from them saying that you'd got the Jazz Performance Award, and I thought, what better way to spend the money than go play Carnegie Hall? I mean, it's not like I'm going to get to play it with an orchestra or anything, you know.
That is so cool, and the poster is still in the chatterbox for everyone to see. And interestingly enough, those individual grants, they didn't exist afterwards anymore. Once all the culture wars happened and the NEA was under uh, attack all the time, they eliminated these direct grants to artists, and it only goes to organizations. So how lucky and how special.
It really was. I think I was the last clarinetist in America to get one. After that, they so I was very fortunate, and we had a great time doing it. It was Claude had a great time doing it, and it's a great memory.
Absolutely, absolutely. And a great legacy. So, well, let's listen to one of those tracks, and this is actually a Chicoria track, Steps What Was, and you know, we recently actually pulled out Steps. Randy Brecker was visiting, and he said, let's not play the super hard stuff. Give me a blues or something. And thinking, even though it's a blues, it's Chicoria and it's sophisticated and it's anything else than a blues. And I just love the way Claude lives up at least to that legacy, to portray exactly that spirit that Chick put in it, right?
Right. Well, Claude was a big fan of Chick,
Mm-hmm.
and when Claude was playing the Canterbury Hotel, Chick came in and sat and listened to Claude play and wrote him a little note afterward and telling him how much he enjoyed his playing. So Claude was
I
a
didn't
real,
know that story. That's
yeah,
cool.
Claude was a really world-class, unique way of playing the piano. He was really something. I was really fortunate to get to meet him and play with him for so long.
Absolutely. I took a few lessons and talking about it, we actually played Windows now that you mention it together. Well, let's have a listen and commemorate this incredible artistry of Claude Sifferlin and of course of you. So here is Steps What Was, a Chicoria tune recorded on the Siamese Twins album. This is Claude Sifferlin on piano and Frank Lover on the clarinet. what was a selection from Siamese Twins, an album by Claude Zifferlin on piano and Frank Lover on clarinet. And Frank Lover is my guest today, and we talked very much about this local legacy that we had with Claude Zifferlin. Now, the last year was pretty different. The last year and a half, nearly two by now. We had to go in hiding. There was no Chatterbox. The Chatterbox was actually closed for, I believe, 16 or 17 months. It just reopened. So all of us got stranded at home and got into all kinds of new ventures. So tell us a little bit about your music ventures that you got to put together.
Well, you described it well. That's exactly right. What I did was I started, since we couldn't play live, and playing at home by yourself is not, lovely. I started to get interested in the DAW, the digital audio workstation, and I started to learn Logic. And I probably only know it 5% or 10%, but I know enough to make a record, and got some sample strings from EW on the West Coast. And I started writing and got some percussion samples, and it was really, really rewarding for me, because I was able to, I can play some stuff on the clarinet and I can write the orchestra around it, or I can write orchestra piece and I can put the clarinet on top of it. So the entire Black Dragon record is me composing with Logic and putting the clarinet on top. And then I think I had Chris Parker play drums on there. Yeah, I think that's right. But it's basically a desktop orchestra created, and then clarinet on top. I mean, it's really, really fun way to compose, because you can add and take away easily. You can do all kinds of stuff with samples, all kinds of acoustical treatments and things like that, and really get the sound that you like. And I was happy with the way Chimera turned out. It's very different writing for me, but I seem to be moving towards more dissonant, more electronic sort of energy. I'm still playing acoustic clarinet. I'm not really electrifying the clarinet, but the background for the clarinet is becoming more and more electric for me. So maybe my most 70s and 80s bands influences starting to come up somehow through my music.
Well, and I can also hear it easily being translated back into instruments if the occasion arises, and opportunities to orchestrate everything as needed. It lends itself.
Yeah, I think it did. I think it does. It would be a tremendous amount of work for somebody probably to transcribe it. And it would be for me, but
Right, that's the advantage, that you can go direct into the music and not the detour of let's write it down and somebody rehearse it more or less and then getting it played.
right. Well, I was talking to Mike Shelley about this. We were talking about how, really the composer's ear is the final judgment of anything. And it doesn't really have to be able to be reproduced on real instruments or anything like that. And sometimes I just go for a color that I really, really like. And I'm not really sure how it would be reproduced on a real instrument. You can come close for sure, but on these last two records, Black Dragon and Tertium Organum, I was going for orchestral colors and electronics that sounded fresh to me, at least with the clarinet added.
It sounds very, very cool. I think we should have a listen. Black Dragon, is there any backdrop to the name, or you just called it Black Dragon?
um yeah, Black Dragon. I have a monster that visits me on occasion, and it's a very scary. And so I named this record Black Dragon because I think I'm moving towards more and more dissonant, more electronic kind of color music, you know. The Black Dragon, a lot of Black Dragon is 12 tone.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a little 12 tone fugue in it. And there's many 12 tone lines on the clarinet and things like that. But it's very listenable. I mean, it's not as atonal as it could be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It absolutely is. Well, let's check it out. So this is Chimera from the Black Dragon, and it was just released in April, and it features my guest today, Frank Glover, on the clarinet, who also composed all the parts to it and put them together in Logic. Here it is. This was Chimera from the Black Dragon release by my guest today, Frank Glover. And we talked about getting into all kinds of new ventures during the pandemic and new ways of composing. And this next one is actually kind of a rearranged and reimagined version of America. And you mentioned that this came from an earlier album, but you put it together for a new tribute album to Claude. So tell us a little bit about that.
My first two records, Mosaic and Something Old, Something New, are way out of print, and nobody can get them anymore, and they're not going to be reprinted. And I wanted to I wanted to take the original compositions off those and put them on a a tribute album for Claude, because he's on both those records. So we have some duo stuff on there, some trio electronic, sort of electronic trio stuff on there, and then there's orchestra stuff. And America is one of my first orchestral pieces. Was played by a studio orchestra up at Airborne. I got to conduct, which is a tremendous thrill to be able to stand up there and conduct your own work. It doesn't really have anything to do with conducting. It has to do with just bliss. You just, they play their parts and you're just up there waving your arms and in bliss. I mean, it's one of the greatest experiences of my life, being up there, listening to your music played back to you. It's very surreal. And I know lots of people are used to this, composers that are well known and that kind of thing. But for just the average person to hear your music back to you played by pros, it's really something. And America turned out very nice, I thought. It's atonal in the sense that Claude and I play the America theme in the wrong key in unison. And it was a challenge for the clarinet to play as in tune as I could, because it's exact unison, and that's not really written very often. A big long melody in unison with the piano, very exposed. And so that's America.
It was very cool. It's kind of the Charles Ives idea of, having different tonalities at the same time, right?
He's one of my very favorite composers. I absolutely love Charles Ives.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And still being absolutely recognizable and listenable. So let's do that. Let's have a listen. So this is America, re-released on the Tones for Boatman album, and originally from the Something Old, Something New album with Claude Zifferlin on piano, and my guest today, Frank Glover, on clarinet. This was an arrangement of America reimagined by my guest today, Frank Glover, who you also heard on clarinet. And we have a few more to go, and we're going back to some of the products, some of the pandemic products. And this is a collaboration that you did with local drummer Chris Parker, and of course the electronics and all. So tell me a little bit about that. Pupil fractions.
Yeah, this is I've been a student of religious philosophy and that area of thought for about 30 or 35 years, a long time. I've read lots of books. I've studied lots of modes of religious endeavor, and for me, just personally myself, I was not able to find the answers that were promised by the world's religions, and that's just my experience. I'm not saying anything about anybody else, and that's not my business. But for me, I've been unable to find the answers that are necessary, really, for for life, you know. So this We Dancing Orphans is sort of my musical expression of those of us who have sort of missed the boat, if you will. And I wrote it just as my own expression. Um, Chris Parker played drums on it. The rest of it is made in Logic with me putting clarinet on top. It's a very strange record. There's electronics, there's funk stuff, there's lots of clarinet multiphonics. Again, it's a color record where it's mostly about the colors. I'm not really a very good melody writer. I'm better at colors and chords. So when I compose, I actually sit down at the piano and just put my fingers on the piano until I find a chord that I like, and then I go from there. It's not like I don't like hear the whole piece and I can transcribe it on a bus or something like that. I don't have those kind of chops at all, So I find things on the piano and I find colors in Logic that I like. Mm-hmm. And we Dancing Orphans is for all of us that sort of were not able to discover what we tried to discover, and the relationships that with some sort of divine power that we wish for. I think that's a fair way to say it.
It is a fair way to say it, and just because there's a few ways out there of how to relate it, it doesn't mean that those are the ultimate truth. There's so many other many variations of finding spiritual connections that everybody finds in their own way. And I love this image of the dancing orphan in the spiritual search for discovery. That's really cool.
Yeah, it actually turned out to be kind of a happy energy record. I'm not really sure how that happened, but and the titles are extremely sarcastic, and but it turned,
that's the way we express things and put them in music, and the way it comes out. So we can find all of these on streaming services, right? Or how?
All this is on Bandcamp. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so looking for Frank Glover band on the Bandcamp site, all these tracks can be found and listened to and purchased and enjoyed. So let's have a listen. So this is Pupil Fractions from We Dancing Orphans, a very recent release by my guest today, Frank Glover, who you also hear on clarinet. Enjoy.
P.D. Ostinsky, a 1920 book that he wrote about the fourth dimension. Um, and
So you got
for some reason, I was reading the book at the same time and writing at the same time, and for some reason I just named the record that.
Gotcha. I was going to ask you how it will influence if it's direct something in the text or just a process or yeah. That's fascinating, and I love that you say that you think this is one of your best works. Because that takes a. It's hard to say for a composer because you're never satisfied, but knowing that means you really really mean it.
Well, the nice thing about Logic, as much as I am sort of an anti-tech guy. I mean, I don't have a cell phone because I don't need one, and the nice thing about technology, at least from the point of somebody composing in Logic or something like that, is that you can listen to it over and over again as many times as you want and take out stuff and add stuff until you get exactly the color that you want. Mm-hmm. And that's a real advantage mm-hmm. because you're not on the clock. You're not, you can't do that in the studio, right. that kind of thing. So even though the technological, the way of making music has its drawbacks, and technology certainly has its drawbacks. It's a real different way to be able to go very slowly and be sure that every second of the piece is what you want. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You can really, by adding things, you can have harmonic motion or you can have rhythmic motion, and so that, and I like working on something until I just can't figure out how to make it better.
The perfectionist speaking. Yeah. So what's next? Now that we can go out, play, what are some things you're up to?
I'm playing the Chatterbox every third Friday with pianist Steve Ali, and usually Chris Parker and Nick Tucker on bass and drums. So that's a real fine thing. And then I'm playing up the Jazz Kitchen every once in a while for their little Wednesday concerts that they have. And I'm trying to get out of the house and go to a jam session here and there, just to keep a connection with people. And then I'm working on a new record called Borders on Madness. And it'll be like Tertium except on steroids. I'm going to play some avant-garde clarinet, and which I've never really done, and build the orchestra around it and see what happens.
Well, we can't wait to get that heard. Let's when the tertium goes on steroids. But first, we have to check out the best work so far, the tertium organum, before it goes on steroids. So Frank, I so appreciate you sharing with me today and sharing your music. It's really great, and we will all go out and hear it live and hear it on Bandcamp and all that good stuff.
Well, I appreciate it, Monica. You're very sweet. It's a privilege to be on the show. I had a great time. I love talking about myself.
Oh, who doesn't? No, we need to talk about the music to really, really understand it. So, all right, so here we go. The last one, Tertium Organum. This features my guest today, Frank Glover, on the clarinet, and of course on everything put together in support of it. So here we go.
Here we go.
thank you for listening to Talking Jazz today. My guest was composer and clarinetist Frank Glover. Tune in for Talking Jazz every Thursday at 11 a.m. and every Monday at 7 p.m. right here on WETF 105.7 FM in South Bend, Indiana, or online at WETFthejazzstation.org. Also find videos of previous shows on YouTube on the Monika Herzig channel. That's MonikaHerzig. Subscribe to get the newest updates. Thank you for listening.